Starting a business is easy. Growing one, that's where most people get stuck. My guest today is Chris McCormick from Luxor Integration in Sydney, though you might know him as the guy behind McCormick Concepts. Chris started as a Sparky, found his way into lighting automation, and somewhere along the line realised that if he didn't start treating his business like a business, it was going to chew him up. I'm Paul Skelton, journalist, industry advocate, and host of Master Integrator. And before we get started, a quick thanks to our sponsors. Integrate Unlimited, exclusive Australian distributor of Mag Theatron, delivering cinema-grade performance to high-end home theatres. And Colosseum, helping integrators communicate, visualise, and sell their work better through interactive 3D presentations. In this episode, Chris talks about the decision to hire a business coach, the reality of stepping back from the tools, and why accountability, not ambition, is what actually moves a business forward. This is Master Integrator. Here's Chris McCormick. Let's start the very beginning. You've been around the industry for a little while, so how did you actually get started?
I think I started as an electrical contractor. I was interested in electronics and things in high school, so I actually did electronics in year 9, year 10, which was a really rare thing then, and I didn't realise that was actually part of the electrical apprenticeship, and I wanted to get into sort of aviation electronics. I had a friend doing that, so that'd be really cool, but just due to some life circumstances, I ended up just leaving school in year 10, at 16 and going and getting a trade. So I did electrical there for a while, just normal residential stuff. As a tradesman, I left there and moved into the commercial space in the hope that I'd get into automation. And the buzzword then was CBus, everyone CBus. I even did a smart wiring accreditation with Cat 5 and how all that worked, which really got my interest, even though looking back was pretty basic. But yeah, unfortunately, when the commercial work I did there, that never really came about to doing CBus. And I just happened to come across a hi-fi company up on the Central Coast that said they did smart home automation. And so I went for an interview there and they were really happy with me, but they had amplifiers and speakers and all these fancy cables with signals. And I'm like, what the hell is this stuff? Didn't really care about it. Actually only cared about lighting automation. And it wasn't until I started, we had a few guys leave there actually. I had to start running jobs and had to make things work. And just seeing the buzz on the customer's face when you set up like a really cool surround sound system and got all that working, or even started programming remote controls and things like RTI. It was just so much fun. I just found myself doing it in my spare time, building macros, building different pages and doing things. And yeah, sort of branched out from there.
In my role, I do tend to talk to the Sparkies a fair bit and a few of the electrical associations as well. And there's always this hesitation to move across. And I think because there's been this legacy of an us and them mentality. But I mean, as a Sparky coming across to the integration side of the industry, how did you wrap your head around it? Was it incredibly daunting, or once you got started, you sat there and went, okay, well, this makes a lot of sense. It kind of aligns with what I already knew?
I think it was a bit of a reality check, if I had to be honest. I mean, what I found back then, it was probably a little bit simpler then too, than it's a lot more complex now, but is that, yeah, it was a massive reality check and questioned the knowledge that I had, because it's a vastly different industry. So I think I was lucky because I worked for one of the larger companies at that time, and I knew some of the others, those sort of names that were out there as part of that starting, and some of them aren't even with us anymore. But yeah, it was just a massive reality check in the deep end. I think I said lucky working for a company that had some knowledge, and then they also put me in touch with some of the best people that are in the industry, and I found out later some of the best in the world. So I think the challenge for electricians now is that there's a lot of pride when they come across that, like, they should know. But your electrical apprenticeship teaches you nothing about this. It teaches you the physical world of how things connect and making it work. It doesn't translate to like a user experience or the software world and how these things all line up to give a customer experience. Because I said it's very different than the PowerPoint on the wall works or it doesn't. Same with a downlight. If you're an electrician, even if you're doing automation, I go through this quite a lot where, do you know how a phase dimmer works? Do you remember back to your second and third year theory about how that works? And it really sort of questions their integrity of what they know. So they either tend to retreat or they get really interested and want to learn more about it, which can be real time consuming as a custom integrator too. So they just want you there all the time. So I think can be quite challenging as an electrician if you're solo without working with a company like us or starting with someone like us and sort of getting in touch with the right people.
So, how long into your work in the integration side of the industry did you decide that you were going to go out on your own and start up your own company?
2 years actually. It didn't take me very long. Where I was working, I saw this habit of people coming into that business and then they wouldn't stay very long. They'd kind of do their work there, they'd start really strong, and then they would end up resigning. And looking back at that, I think it was because the business owner there was from a hi-fi background, and the smart home side was extremely complex. And so he would just copy paste the system and go, okay, I've sold a system. Here you go. Make it all happen. Project manage it, order all the products, do all the drawings, do all the engineering. You wouldn't know anything about who it worked, and you'd end up calling everyone trying to figure it all out, and you'd be in front of the customer. And I guess at the time I just went, I'm doing everything else other than selling it. I might as well just run my own business. And I actually approached him about that and said, look, if you don't, I'd love to be part of it. If not, I'll start my own thing. And he didn't come on board. So here I am.
And so, what year was that?
That was in 2008, which was also a big wake up call because I'd started my trade, would have been the year 2000, showing my age, would have been the year 2000. And it was the boom. I started my apprenticeship in the boom. There was so much work. Everything was gold. I was young. I was only 16 when I started. And I started my business, I think it was August in 2008. I think the GFC hit around that September, October. So any sort of jobs and clients I had lined up, everything was frozen. Everything disappeared. So yeah, it was really challenging to get started and get a brand out there.
So that was 17 years ago, which is quite a long time and quite a lot longer than some other integrators have kind of been in the game. Over that 17 years, how has your business progressed?
Yeah, well, I think when I started, I was hungry, motivated, but young and naive. Had no idea about bookwork and things. I had parents that owned a business. I saw how hard they worked. I knew how to do the work, but actually managing things like cash flow and looking at pipelines and things, even things like marketing. I won a big job when I first started, and then I spent $25,000 on radio advertising. I mean, I wouldn't even do that now at the size we are. You really have no idea. So you just have a stab in the dark and you just don't really know. And so you just ride a bit of a roller coaster. So those first sort of 5 or 6 years, you sort of grow a bit and you have fears around getting new staff and that sort of thing. But like I said, as a business owner, it's a bit of a lonely world. Everyone just expects you to have all the answers. So you just sort of roll with the punches. But yeah, I probably say a turning point for me, was probably about 6 or 7 years in, and I started a showroom and ended up getting some business coaching as well, just through some networking groups that I was sort of joining. And yeah, that sort of opened my eyes a bit, and we kicked some goals from there.
So business coaching is definitely a topic that I want to talk to you about, because this is something that I know carries a lot of stigma, especially around small businesses, a lot of trades businesses. I imagine that some of that stigma probably comes from a lack of understanding of what a business coach or a business mentor actually is. So from your experience, how did you engage with the business coach and what have they actually done for you?
Yeah, I think there's different sorts of business coaches. And it's funny because I've referred my coach and others to other people. But I guess there's a stigma that as a business owner, you know everything. And that if you don't, and you've got a coach, you mustn't know what you're doing. But if you look at sports, for instance, there's a coach on the team. When you're in the thick of it and you're in your top of your game, you have a coach there to sort of help you through your own personal fears or your own thoughts and things that are holding you up from growing as a person, which is usually what holds you up from growing your business. So that's sort of been my understanding. So I think, like I said, I've just happened to run into a business coach at one of those networking groups, and as they do, you got financial planners and all these sorts of guys that want to get your business. And I sort of sat down with him and looked at how he looked at flows and systems, and that's sort of something I knew from a technical side, and that sort of made sense to me. So it sort of exposed me to some things. So I just gave it a go. Probably not a wholehearted go to start with the first guy I had. And he was a really lovely guy, but he was a bit of a pushover, and I was pretty strong-willed. So I wasn't really honest with him or myself. And so it didn't really work out that well. But the next business coach I had already grown a very large company, a guy from van in a van to over 100 vans on the road. And he had a much different approach. He was from the electrical side. And I'd say the first thing that I learned, and this would be anything that I would have with anybody, is that when you're the boss, you're accountable to nobody, but you're responsible for everything. So everything that you do has a consequence. Now, you would hold your staff accountable if they didn't turn up on time or they didn't get their jobs done for the day. But as a boss, you're like, oh, I can do that later, or yeah, I'll get there and we'll do all these things. But the first thing I found with a coach was he held me accountable to do what I said I would do. So if I said that I would hit a target or I would talk to this many people, whatever, all he would do is ask me, did I do those things? And you suddenly feel under pressure and you realize you're not actually delivering on what you said you were going to do. So that's the first bit of feedback I see from people. They're like, oh, my coach, he's making me do all this stuff. I can't do it or whatever. And I'm like, he's probably just holding you accountable to doing what you say you'll do. And that's probably the first thing that I would say. And then the second part of that will be is working through your fears. There'll be something that you're doing or a fear that you might have that's holding you back from going to another step. So that'll be different for everybody. And the more excuses you make, the longer it's going to take to do it. And so it's really up to you. So it can be a little confronting at first, but once you get used to it and you trust who you're with, I find it a really rewarding experience. And anytime I think about walking away from it, I'll have another meeting and it just helps clear things up. And I've had that coach now for over 10 years, quite a close friend now. So yeah, it's very interesting.
So there's a couple of things there that you mentioned that I want to circle back to. So if we go back to the first coach that you had when you had that initial conversation, when you were having that conversation with him, was what he was saying aligning with something you'd already recognized in your business as maybe a tipping point or a potential red flag or something that you were concerned about? Or was it really you were just going in a chance meeting and when he started explaining it, it clicked in your mind and you thought, oh, okay, I can use this?
I think it was a case of with him, I think he was sort of part of a bigger coaching business and they had sort of systems and processes on how you could approach things. But I think, like, looking back, I probably wasn't honest enough with him about what I was and wasn't doing, and he wasn't checking enough. So that just meant that I wasn't getting the results. There's still some of the systems that he gave me I use now that are like legacy. Probably don't even really need them. Just even things with like time management and things like that. So I don't think he was a bad coach by any means, but sometimes you just got to find people that work with your personality. I said, there's probably a lot of big egos in this industry and you start pretty strong and you want to be really proud of it. Sometimes you just need someone to go, sort of just cut the bullshit. Did you do this or not? Like, are you working on it? If you don't want to, that's cool. But
so I think the main kind of takeaway from that first coach, though, is that you didn't give up on the concept of a business coach, even though he wasn't the right fit for you. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that just because it doesn't work the first time, it can still work. It really is finding that right fit. How do you go about making sure they're the right fit? Obviously for you, it was being held accountable, but I imagine that would require a lot of self-awareness to be able to say, this is what I need.
I'm trying to reflect back onto how I thought about things. I think the hard thing when I got started, even with the newer coach, was sort of looking at what I was doing and some things that can potentially be flaws that we see as not flaws. So for instance, I was very perfectionistic. I would spend a lot of time if I was creating a brochure for a builder or something like that. I'd spend so much time trying to make it perfect that by the time it was ready to deliver, I'd already be on to the next topic. So he pretty much just said to me, put a sign up next to your computer, be consistent every day. These are the 5 things you need to do and just do it for 90 days. Don't think about anything else, just deliver on those and just see that through. And the first time I did that, I just couldn't believe it. And I did that for a year and I doubled the size of my business. So sometimes it's just a little bit of a leap of faith. It doesn't sound very exciting. But if what you're doing isn't working, you've got to do something else. And those people can see through. And it'll be something really basic. Like I said, for me, it was just not being so perfectionistic with things. Just get it there, get it 80%, put it out to market, be consistent with what you're doing every day, and it will just start to happen. And I still live by that now, and I suggest that to anybody.
When you are the boss of a company, and like you said, you are essentially accountable to no one, but you're responsible for everyone. But at the same time, people go into business because they are passionate or because they want to be in control of what they do. Did you struggle to actually relinquish any form of control to the business coach? Did you feel like they were overstepping? Or, I mean, how comfortable were you with saying, here's everything we do, now it's on you?
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it is that this coach that I use anyway, I mean, he'll have some thoughts on how business should work and flow, but he's not a consultant. He's not consulting my business on how to do a cash flow projection or how to do any of those things. It's purely, where's your mindset at? What are your goals? How are you going to get there? Let's break that down. So that's sort of how that side of it flows.
Okay, so has there been one piece of advice that he's given you that's really just stuck with you? And, well, in addition to being consistent, but is there anything else he's said that you've really stuck with and run with, and you can say, this is what has really changed my business?
I think that sort of comes in stages. I think depends where you're at and what you're working on. I mean, I think the biggest part, like I said, with a business owner is because you're not accountable to anybody. It's just being really honest with yourself. You know, when there are problems and something's happening, you start firing up with excuses. Ultimately, it's on you, right? Like there's always things out there. There will always be someone else that could have done or handled that better. That would be the thing, is that when something's going on, you feel yourself resisting, you feel yourself bringing up those excuses. You need to look back on yourself and go, what could I have done differently to change that? I think that's really the hardest thing. And the more you can get over that, the more you're going to grow, whether it's a business or even on the technical side, anything like that.
What would you say to integrators who are out there that feel stuck in their business, and what could they be doing?
Really depends where they are. You know, I think there's probably a lot of people that, you know, get to a business and go, I want to hit a certain amount of turnover, or, you know, I want to have this many people. I mean, getting clearer maybe what you want to do and where you want to go is, I know it sounds really strange that way, but yeah, I just try and break things down into 90-day blocks. You need usually at least 3 months to see something through. That's where I would start with that. And look, if you're an integrator, you're probably really good at what you do. I mean, we'll debate various levels of technical capability, but if you're going to be a business owner, you need to learn how to run a business. So whether that's a business coach, finding a good accountant as well, that's another challenging sort of one, and understanding how the numbers flow, and getting comfortable with that. So that was another challenge I had, you know, maybe 6 or 7 years in. My business had nearly tripled in turnover within that sort of 3-year period. And we had some real challenges there for a while, and learning to read those numbers. That's another really exposing thing I find when I've talked with, you know, there's another integrator I'm working with, and just exposing that part.
So how did you get comfortable with the numbers?
Probably helped that I dated the accountant. It worked the other way around, but no, I found that accountants came up with things with numbers, and they'd run percentages monthly and things like that, and they didn't really understand my business. So the next accountant I had understood, you know, as a custom integrator, your jobs might span over 2 years. You're not pushing 150, 200 products a month and just throwing them out the door. There's a life cycle of that. So she sort of taught me how to sort of manage those numbers, plan out when those numbers would fall, look at our static costs and what those real figures were. And again, that was another growing point, being able to sort of look at our pipeline, look at that cash flow and what our costs were, and get an understanding of that. And then you can make decisions based on that in the future. And I still use that methodology today.
Was there a moment in time where it all finally clicked in your mind? Something that you can isolate and say, okay, this is where it all made sense. This is what happened that changed me, changed my business, and put me on the right path.
I think, well, again, I think when you grow your business, so, you know, when I went from, say, you know, 350,000 turnover, the next year I did 700, and then the following year I did 1.4, right? So it grew really fast. And then I made a lot of mistakes with cash flow on those first couple of years, and it took me a couple of years to recover from that. So I think at that time, as a business, and I guess I see this with even electrical contracting businesses, when you start working with those bigger numbers, building out your pipeline and building your cash flow, it doesn't have to be as detailed as what an accountant will do. Someone could run a P&L for me, and I could look really quickly and look at those expenses and go, this is how much it's going to cost you. Let's say, you know, you got 4 or 5 guys on the road, your business might cost you 50,000 a month. You know, if you're working on 30% gross profit, it's times it by 3. That's the turnover you need to hit every month to pay the bills. Now let's look at your pipeline for the next 6 months. Where are your jobs going to fall? Tell me your gut instinct. Where's that going to fall? And you just map that out and you go, look, there's a hole there with 70 grand. Do you have a 70 grand job in mind? Oh yeah, I was doing this other guy the other day. Cool. Go focus on that. So it's really as simple as that. Like, at least in the custom space where these jobs are larger. And then, yeah, being really honest with where those jobs fall too, because, you know, the other mistake I've seen with integrators is, you know, they'll be doing 10, 20 grand jobs, which are cool. And one day 100 grand job's going to land on their lap, and they can fall over from that because that might be half a year's turnover for them. And they'll go to do that job and they think it's going to fall in March. Next thing it's August, September. They haven't paid, they've ordered gear, they haven't managed it. And then they're struggling, they can't order products, and they can fall over. So there's definitely a learning curve there when you're going from those small jobs, easy to manage, to those large ones.
And when you did that as a company, I mean, how many of the policies or processes that you already had in place did you have to change? Was it basically rewrite everything, or did you have some underlying things that you could use from those smaller jobs, or really did you start from scratch again?
Like from a technical standpoint, they're kind of the same. You just break it up a little differently. I think it came back to like just managing when we were collecting money for those jobs as well, and putting that forward to customers so they understood how we were doing that. And then just getting better at understanding where a job's at as well. So, if you think the job's gonna land where in May, it's gonna land in May, go talk to the builder, go to site, go have a quick look. Actually, you know what? They said it was gonna be May, but it's gonna be August. So I need to reshift that and go, okay, well, what have we got here that we can fit in? And that's sort of how you can manage yourself, because otherwise you'll play this roller coaster of boom bust cash flow, and that's how guys cut corners and don't do good quality work. That's what I've seen. So getting really clear on your payment terms, making it transparent to the customer from the beginning. So make sure there's value added when you're going to invoice and what you're going to do. That was probably a real big one for me. You got a happy customer with where you're at and you've explained it. I have no problems getting invoices paid anymore. Very, very rare.
That was going to be something that I was going to ask when you mentioned cash flow, because I mean, I know so many integrators, they are slack on sending invoices for one, and then they hate chasing money. So how have you addressed that within your business? I mean, you said obviously now people pay it on time, but when you first made that change, did you have to have someone chasing payments, or did you have someone dedicated to that role? How did you actually go around that side to make sure your cash flow came in on time?
Yeah, well, I sort of review our cash flow as a very rough projection. Like I said, those rough numbers, this is what it costs me as a business, this is what sales we need, and then we just pop that into a funnel in an Excel spreadsheet, and then I know where they are, how big our pipeline is, and just, yeah, like I said, if you might have 10 jobs, you might have 100 jobs, doesn't matter, just roughly map them out so I can see that. My accountant works for me a couple of days a week, so we just get them to put that in there. They send out those invoices on my approval, and I always make sure that whatever we're invoicing for, that's the stage of the job that we're at. And you only need to have maybe a 15-minute, half an hour meeting. But I can tell you, having that meeting versus trying to explain to a client that's offside by invoicing incorrectly, or trying to talk to a supplier because you can't pay their bill at the end of the month and you need products for the next, takes up so much more time than spending 15 minutes to half an hour a week just getting that in and sending that out. And I said, you don't have to send an invoice every day. Pick a day at the week, block out some time, push it out. It's really as simple as that.
So if we go back to the process of having the business coach involved, over the time that they have been involved, how has your role changed within the company?
Yeah, well, I haven't really been on the tools as much probably for the last 8 years. I'll still go out there and help the guys if I need to, but to be honest, they do a much better job than I do now. All credit to them. So I tend to focus more on the sales, design, pipeline side. And then I'm trying to delegate more and more of that work out. So, the ultimate goal is to run the business and network with your customers and vendors and things. I'm not quite there yet, but yeah, I've sort of changed from that more technical role, handed that off. That's always a challenge, letting go of that side of things. Yeah, but I guess it's the same with any of these other roles now that we're working through.
And were there any moments during the past, say, 10 years where you've sat there and thought, nah, I'm done with this coaching. It's not working for me, or I've had enough?
I've never done it because it's not working. Whenever I've had the most amount of struggles, that's actually when I find the biggest value in it. It's actually when things are good that you tend to sort of go, I don't need it anymore. And yeah, you'll waver in and out with that. And like I said, I've known him a long time. But I think like every time I go in there, like it's sort of, as you go along on this journey, you'll have a coach. They know you so well that they'll be able to sort of see into the future of where you're going. And I can sort of tell now the way he starts to talk about things tells me some of the challenges or things that I'm going to be coming up to, So, like with launching our new brand, he'll be talking about things like, how are you going to market that? Who's going to be doing that? Who's making those phone calls? Have you put a strategy together for that well and truly before the brand had launched, So, or it could be staff. How are you going to delegate that out? Who's going to fit into this ops role? Where are you looking for those people? yeah, like I said, you just get to know after a while that they're looking further into the future than you are, and it's a good insight. But yeah, again, you sort of sit there back with the excuses again if you want to hold yourself back.
So you mentioned there the new brand. So let's go down this path. You're in the process of rebranding. Tell me a little bit about the new brand that you're going for.
I guess, yeah, after doing a more technology business, 17, 18 years, nearly 18 years, it sort of came to my attention, I think, where the market's going, at least as a custom integrator. And I can see a lot more people coming into this space, and they start with very entry level solutions, and that's becoming a really competitive space. So I figured with our skill set, the products that we have access to, and our sort of design knowledge, that we wanted to work more in the luxury space. And it's not that we couldn't do it, but I wanted to make sure that the company and the brand that we put forward represented those values. So I started going down the pathway of getting a branding consultant to talk about what that would be like. So I was just lucky enough to know one again from the same networking group I met 12, 13, 14 years ago, met with her. And she'd work with people like Westfields, MasterCard, help building their brands and colours and things. And look, I'm a technology integrator. Colours, finishes, how things represent, how it makes people feel wasn't really my skill set. I could see it. I could see what people did, especially with our like engineered theatres and how they would look. But we're all nerds at the end of the day. We're all technology guys. So we went down that pathway, and we worked together with, well, what are our values? What are our values? What are the kinds of customers that we want to have? How do we want them to feel with our brand? When they walk in, what do they feel like? So we started in that pathway, and then this sort of grew into a big monster, which has been a really big learning curve. And something I thought I'd have licked in 90 days has taken me, 9, 10 months. Yeah, it's been a real challenge, but it's very exciting. Nearly there.
So where did you land with it, and in terms of what did you want people to feel when they saw your brand and engaged with you?
Yeah, I wanted them to feel that it was, simple, elegant, inviting, and that sort of feel of luxury. So if people are building a 10, 20, $30 million home, they've got consultants that they spend lots of money on to have a particular feel, a vibe. So that's what we were aiming for. And I said it wasn't that we couldn't deliver it. And I would say the same thing for most people, that they could deliver that kind of solution. But you need the customers and the architects that work with you to sort of feel that way too. And so that's why we went with our naming, the colours, all that sort of stuff. And it sort of really sort of comes to life that way. And in particular, the showroom. But again, that was sort of another evolving beast that can grow out of control.
Tell me a little bit more about this group that you were a part of, 10 or 12 years ago, where you managed to find a business coach and a branding consultant. Clearly, this group's worked for you. It's paid off. So how did you get involved with that? Where did you find that? And where did that
Yeah,
come
look,
from?
I would just, I said when I started my business, I had it in my head, I was really adamant I didn't want to do electrical contracting work. I just wanted to do custom stuff. I didn't want to get stuck in that world. So I just tried to network wherever I could. Had no idea what I was doing, by the way. So I went to like BNI groups, so Business Networking International, went to those. Like I met lots of great people there, but its structure on how it did referrals and things for my kind of business, doing a handful of high-end projects a year, I just couldn't meet their requirements of the weekly referrals and the meetings and things. But yeah, I just end up meeting some really great people, end up making a couple of really good friends as well. But yeah, I haven't been there for a long time, and yeah, you just sort of stay in touch with them. So yeah, I mean, it's a good place to start, but you got to commit to it.
Are there any other consultants that you've met that you've brought in to your business or use for your business, or kind of have in mind that you could one day see yourself using?
No, I think, like I said, the branding consultant's been really good. And on that marketing side, if you're doing a showroom, I would say to people, just get an architect. After all the time I've spent, even working with people I know, just get a builder and architect to do it. You'll knock it over much faster. Um, no, really, it's just the coach and the branding consultant. And yeah, that's really it at this stage.
And so with the business coach, how often do you talk to them now, 10 years in?
Fortnightly.
Okay.
Fortnightly. So we just have a 1.5 or an hour to 2 hour call. We can talk more than that. And then usually we just review some of those goals and where things are going, what we're doing. He'll follow that up with an email, and we'll go through that together. But I'd imagine it's pretty custom for whoever you deal with. So originally it was once a month. Again, it comes back to how much money you want to spend on it. You could and what sort of help you want. If you want to accelerate, you might want to meet with them every week. If you just want to sort of touch base and just keep yourself from straying off the pathway you're on, maybe once a month would be enough. Yeah, you can sort of let them guide. How fast do you want to move? How much do you want to grow?
And looking back now, is there anything that you wish you knew when you started in 2008 that you know now?
I think just any business out there, just learning about business. I mean, like I said, it doesn't matter if you're an electrician or you're wanting to get a custom smart home or anything. If you want to be a really good integrator, go work for another company and be the best integrator you can, and then go home at 4:00 and forget about the world. If you want to be a good business owner, go learn about business, because your life will get better, and just realize at some stage you're going to have to relinquish some of that integration side to others, and your focus will be coming on business. So, I mean, the only exception there would be if you want to be a contractor, you want to have some flexible hours. That all comes at a cost, of course. You can't just make the most amount of money with the least amount of effort. But yeah, just if you're going to go in business, learn about business. And whether that's, I wouldn't say there'd be any disadvantage of doing any courses about business, project management, coaching, accounting, anything like that is all going to help you understand how business works.
So the last question that I've got, the idea of success, has that changed for you now compared to what it was when you first started?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when you start, and again, it might be different for everybody, but yeah, you think you're going to take on the world. You're just one job away from making millions. I mean, we still even think that now, that other jobs really, so, it's all about turnover, right? You're like, oh, I'll do this job and we'll turn over more money. But as time gone along now, I look at better quality jobs, been making sure that our values align with that customer, and yeah, making sure that it's profitable. And I guess as you get older, disseminating your knowledge to your staff and to other people around you, and sort of using that knowledge, and that's quite rewarding as well. So that's a different mindset than it was when I got started, which was turnover, grow, have 50 vans on the road, take on the world. And
so what would you like to see happen next?
so I think just around the coaching side of it and getting rid of that stigma, and even putting coaching aside for anybody sort of entering this industry, would be electricians or guys getting started, is there's lots of guys like me out there that are happily will give away some of their knowledge to do and where to go, because ultimately, while we might be competition on some level, someone quoting a better quality job, doing better quality work, isn't really competition at all. If we're all doing the right things that way, we just sort of elevate the industry and give a customer a good experience. So you'll more than find, like I said, some of those bigger guys out there, you give them a phone call, they'll tell you where to go. What software do I use? What supplier do I need to talk to? Or you need access to a product or something like that. I think most of us will be more friendly than you think, and we can definitely help you out. And like I said, elevating the industry makes it better for our customers. And we've all seen those disaster jobs out there from things not being done right. Talk to people. Talk to your suppliers. Ask the suppliers, who do I talk to about using this product or fixing this problem? Just make sure you use those resources. You don't have to do it on your own. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to get a better result for the customer, less stress for yourself.
That was Chris McCormick, and what I love about that conversation is how familiar it probably felt to a lot of you. The cash flow stress, the perfectionism, the fear of letting go. But here's the point Chris kept coming back to. Growth starts with honesty. Not just the work you're doing, but the work you're avoiding. And whether that's invoicing, hiring, branding, or building out systems, it's your responsibility. If you're the boss, you're accountable to no one, but you're responsible for everything. That's not something most of us were taught. But if you want to lead a business, you need to start learning. Thanks for listening to Master Integrator. I'm Paul Skelton. I'll see you next time.